Thank you for joining us. My name is Maren Sakri. I'm the Director of Marketing for Evolve AI and will be your host today. Eager to kick off this conversation with Lena Mahmood, a career product manager, and Dan Zola, a UX strategist. This is the Think CX 19, How to Use Analytics to Improve the Customer Experience. Before I introduce our panelists, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask those in the Q&A area. If they do come up in conversation, happy to ask those. Otherwise, we will reply back in email post-webinar. Playback will also be distributed via email post-webinar and posted to our YouTube channel. If you haven't already, please follow us on YouTube. We have 18 other Think CX topics posted for your content consumption, and you don't need to actually fill out a form. So kind of a nice add in there. Before we jump in, let me introduce our panelists. We have Lena Mahmood, a seasoned product manager and has worked across B2B, B2C, SaaS, and e-commerce with a specific focus on the food tech space. Lena is also a DE&I leader focused on building inclusive and authentic workplaces, a passionate speaker on radical empathy, product management for the fourth industrial revolution. Welcome, Lena.
Thank you.
Dan Zola, a UX strategist, works with Evolve AI, an AI-driven solution for digital growth optimization. Dan's devotion to UX principles nearly 20 years ago. He's developed digital products and led teams for a variety of industries, including healthcare, telecommunications, and entertainment. For those that dig pop culture, Dan spent 5 years at MTV. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right, so let's get into the good stuff. So I'm going to kick this off and just dive right into analytics. Lena, how have you used analytics in your role?
Yeah, I think that analytics is truly the lifeblood of any strong product organization. So being able to identify kind of what are measures of success, what are countermeasures that are showing you that maybe you're not going down the right path, and then being able to pivot very quickly provides that kind of agile mentality that's super essential to any strong, I would say, not only product-led organization, but any strong organization generally. So analytics are super duper important, and I can't stress enough to all the folks that I work with how important they are and how building a business case rooted in analytics is absolutely essential.
Absolutely. I certainly agree, Lena. The idea of having metrics for success, understanding what your goals are so that you can move toward them and achieve them, getting your team aligned, having a baseline, all of that is rooted in understanding metrics and the analytics of your product, your process, and certainly important for the start of any project and throughout to create a successful product and a successful experience.
Yeah, Dan, I love how you mentioned aligning teams as well, where I think that that's something that happens naturally when you align on your analytics and align on your metrics, that by bringing in different stakeholders and by bringing in different team members along for that journey, rather than just, let's say, identifying them and then trickling them down, that can be such a huge team building exercise, can be an enormous way to build empathy with your end users. Can't agree more.
Yeah, I'd say it's a secondary outcome, but I don't want to trivialize it, because aligning your team, hearing from those squeaky wheels, making sure that everyone is on board and knows what we're all moving toward, how we all move towards success together. It's paramount for a successful product and project.
So I want to dive into a little bit. You guys have both mentioned North Star metrics. How do you tie North Star metric to analytics?
Yeah, I can take a stab at this. I think that, so to first define what your North Star metric is, your North Star metric is that ideal metric that you're following no matter what. So like if you would imagine that you're steering a ship and you don't have modern navigation equipment, it's the one that's keeping you on track, that you know that based on how that North Star metric is doing, You can tell how your product is doing and how your customers are using your product and so on. And so for that reason, it's not, I think, a metric that I encourage folks to just pick like right off the bat. It's important to kind of go through and do a serious brainstorming session to identify not only what potential North Star metrics are, but what are generally the framework of metrics that you're going to use and how do they tie together. So I generally encourage folks to take like a three-pronged strategy with identifying a North Star metric. First, identifying big bucket metrics. So really brainstorming, like, let's throw everything at the wall. What are the metrics that are going to be identified success for this particular product? And then understanding what are user actions that actually lead to specific outcomes with those big bucket metrics. What are things that we're trying to get our users to do that would then lead to, monthly active users, to revenue, to traffic, things like that. And then from there, I think that in my past experience, at least, it's been pretty easy to suss out what that North Star metric is, because you can see that because of all of those user actions, what is the one metric that kind of can encompass all of those and guide your team to building that product that you're looking to build?
That makes a lot of sense. And the idea of doing that kind of methodical exploration of what that metric or metrics might be. And you said something that sparked an idea that with regard to good user experience, good UX, as being the intersection of business goals, what makes sense to the business, and user goals. What resonates most with your users. And sometimes, and when there is that strong alignment, that's great, right? You're a major e-commerce player, and ultimately, sales and revenue are driving, are your North Star. And that obviously has business goals, but also has impact for users. The easier I can make purchases, the more I want to purchase those products and can do so effortlessly and be engaged, the more I'll purchase. Or if you're, say, entertainment, you say you're Netflix and you're all about video plays and watching of episodes, how that drives ultimately business goals, but again is relevant for the user, right? Makes sense for the user as a key indicator of engagement. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I like that, thinking about it as key indicators of engagement.
So I'm going to tee this next question up to you, Dan. We've all been in the room where there's that one personality that just has a certain inclination to long page scrolling or name your feature, right? So when it comes to UX, how can analytics inform better decisions and help steer the ship a little bit, just in terms of going to move or test next?
Yeah, in many ways, data and analytics can be your strongest weapon against those personalities that pop up in the room. Because then you're never arguing me against them or us versus them. It's what does the data show? And there are all these fun animal acronyms out there. And my favorite these days is HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion, right? Whoever sits at the end of the table and says, I think it should be like this. Well, okay, that's one way to go. But when we look at the data, when we see where the drop-off rates are, or where the app uninstalls, or where we see where buying trends are happening with regard to whether it's geography or seasonality, we can use that data to make decisions. And it's a great, I'll say it again, it's a great weapon at your disposal to build a case and present it in such a way that it's not about clashing personalities, but such that ultimately the data is elevated, and in so the user's needs are elevated through that data. So it's never one person's opinion. And I find research is the best way to combat that.
Yeah, I found that whether it's a hippo or whether it's someone who's just very outspoken, oftentimes folks may have trouble separating what they would do from what their users would do. And
Right.
metrics is such an important, to Dan's point, weapon to be able to use to say, just because you would use a product a certain way doesn't necessarily mean our users are using the product that way. And we're hoping that our users would use a product a certain way.
I recently, over the summer, taught a class in user experience research and design. And I think the first rule we taught was that you are not the user. That and it's especially true if you are involved in a product and you have an intimate knowledge of how it works and how you'd like users to use it. And that's great, but they're going to use it how they use it. More to the point, you have the burden of knowledge. You know that, well, if users simply navigate this way, or that the products are available over here, and you know the intricacies of how everything works, but your users don't. And you need to step back from that. All to the point, you're not the user. And the best way to determine those users' needs, and so that you can serve up something that works for them, is through data and analytics.
Selena, can analytics predict the future, or is it mostly confirming assumptions?
I really like this question because I do a talk that's called, it's specifically for product managers, but it's called "You're a Product Manager, Not a Fortune Teller." And it's using kind of that notion of, can your metrics predict what are going to be future user behaviors? Obviously, there's certain things that happen, like, for example, what we're living through right now, COVID, that none of us could have predicted. And that significantly either accelerated business goals for some businesses, especially on the e-commerce side, or slowed things down on other business sides. And could anyone have predicted that would happen? Probably not. I know that most of the businesses that I know of didn't even have kind of fallback strategies or plans of what to do if there's a global pandemic, for example. No one planned for this. But that being said, I think that metrics, especially if you are looking at your metrics on a lifetime level and on a yearly level, especially, you're able to predict out trends of, like, okay, what is shopping behavior going to look like during the holiday season, for example, if I'm an e-commerce site, or what happens in January when folks are trying to save a little bit more money, things like that. So to answer your question, so I don't go too roundabout around it, I think it's a bit of both. That metrics can confirm hypotheses that you put in front of around surrounding user behavior and surrounding how you folks actually use your products. And they can either confirm or deny those hypotheses. And you can use that information to then say, okay, based on what we know of how folks use it today, we have a pretty strong inclination to understand how folks are going to use these products in the future. And then you're able to see also counter metrics, that if things drop off suddenly, what's going on? Is there an issue that's internal to the team or internal to the product, for example, that, like, let's say users or traffic dropped off significantly over a certain week or a certain quarter? Being able to look into that and say, okay, this was an issue because we had a bug in our system, or this is a larger issue that, something like COVID is happening, or there's a new regulation that's happening in this specific market. So I think that the strength of analytics being able to either predict user behavior or confirm your assumptions about user behavior really relies on you being able to suss out all of those different data points that go into the metrics, whether it's the timing, whether it's the location, whether it's the certain user personas that you're targeting with those metrics, to be able to suss it out a little bit better.
I like that phrase, this idea of metrics being used to validate hypotheses. Absolutely, right? I mean, that's what we're doing. Certainly, day in and day out, when we're doing UX research, when we're building products, we think that users are going to perform in such a way, but let's validate that. Let's validate that through data. And one of the best indicators we have for future trends are past trends. That's, other than, I'm sure there's some crystal ball metaphor to be made. Without that, looking at past trends is a wonderful indicator of how things will move in the future, whether it's seasonality or general user engagement. That makes a lot of sense. Validating, using data to validate hypotheses.
Yeah, and that data could be, I mean, I think that when folks think about metrics, they automatically think about quantitative metrics, things like conversion, things like retention or monetization and revenue, but they can also be qualitative. I think that one of the ones that I really love that Facebook uses is time well spent on their platform. And I mean, that's a very subjective kind of metric. It's like, what does time well spent mean and how does it mean different things to different people? But I love the idea of being able to combine the qualitative with the quantitative to be able to your point, Dan, validate or invalidate your hypotheses.
I'm glad you brought that up. I love the qualitative data, and you're right. I think it is often overlooked. It is a wonderful tool to uncover user emotion and what motivates them to take an action, to make a purchase, to download a white paper, whatever it is. You know, I know last time, Lena, we were chatting about Net Promoter Score and how it's an industry standard that measures customer engagement, and it's made up of two categories, two items: 1 to 10 rating scale and that qualitative data. Not a big fan of 1 to 10 rating scales, and that might be a conversation for another time. In short, your 7 might not be my 7, and maybe I don't give, on a scale of 1 to 10, I never give 1s or 10s, so it's really a scale of 2 to 9. But what I do love about the Net Promoter Score data is the qualitative that comes in. Why did I give that product a number? Why did I assign it a 7 or a 6 or an 8? And if you get all those records in, hundreds, thousands, and go through them and identify trends, because it's never about one particular comment or one particular data piece, but trends, and identify, gosh, it looks like 60% of people are having trouble with adding to cart, or 40% of people are having trouble downloading and accessing this video, and 30% of people are having trouble with login. Then you can start to build a roadmap for product improvements, a roadmap that's based on user data, and help drive you to success. Qualitative, love that.
So I want to push this a little step further. We've talked a little bit about predictions, right? But is it possible to use analytics to understand intent and shape CX in real time? Dan, what are your thoughts there?
Is it possible to understand intent in real time? Well, I know that, gosh, I know we're working on some of that now with regard to, how a user maneuvers around a site, how they are either clicking the back button or rage clicking because they're frustrated. I'd be curious to get your take, Lena. I know that if you have any thoughts on that. At first glance, I don't have anything currently. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to asking like kind of why are we looking for those insights? Why is it important to have those insights in real time versus after the fact versus after a user actually engaged in the session? How do we define a session? And thinking about it maybe more holistically in that regard is kind of where my mind is going with it. Because I think that oftentimes, especially if we're talking about metrics, folks like to say there's like a silver bullet metric or something like that that says, okay, this is absolutely predicting what's happening right now, versus what happened a week ago versus what happened a month ago. And I don't know if I necessarily believe in those kinds of silver bullet metrics. Like there's obviously your North Star metric that's generally encompassing all of your other metrics. But I think it's back to your question that you asked me earlier, Maren, about can you fortune tell? Can you really use metrics to be able to predict future behavior? It's like kind of in that middle portion of can you predict what's happening right now with your users. And I just kind of question, like, why are you trying to do that versus, and are there answers that you're not getting from examining past data or having your hypothesis, like, or having rather the data be speaking to a specific hypothesis that you might have that might have to do with, okay, right this moment, how many people are abandoning cart, for example?
Yeah, and I struggle with this question in no small part because I don't know about the impact that that drives for your product or your process. Other than that, I know Google Analytics has that it's not new anymore, that that real-time right now feature where it'll tell you there are 190 people on your site right now. But that kind of snapshot, I think, isn't as impactful as whether it's looking at data over a day, a week, a month, a year, and doing that deep dive analysis. I think one can get trapped in kind of a say vanity metric of that real-time data, and I don't know that that has strong influence over product success.
What about using AI? So, I mean, we're obviously in the business of technology here. So, if you look at being able to take data and quickly make changes automatically to CX in real time, to me that although it's not a crystal ball, right? You're making a prediction and you're testing it, but it's happening immediately. What are your thoughts there?
I love that idea, honestly, I mean, that would be the coolest thing for me, is to be able to kind of adjust different variables in real time for experimentation. And that's something that I don't often see in the market right now, is that you have an experiment where you say, okay, we're going to have a control group. We're going to say, at a very simple level, I'm going to adjust the placement of this specific CTA from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen and see like what my engagement is. But if we were able to, and I think this is with a big asterisk, I'm saying this because it has to do a lot with sample size. And obviously if you have 10 people that are going through your experiment, is your sample size large enough to be able to say, this is the results of the experiment? Probably not. But let's say that you have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of folks going on your site, and you're able to say, okay, there's much stronger engagement with variable B. Let's say that's CTA at the bottom of the screen for whatever reason. You're not sure what that reason is. You'd be able then to add in other variables in real time to be able to measure that. I think that would be such a cool use case that I haven't really seen with experimentation platforms in my experience.
And that's the beauty of AI, right? That you're able to not only host, but track and analyze all those different variants in real time, dozens or hundreds or thousands, depending on the scope of the project. And if you can begin to, through personalization, which I know is paramount, be able to serve up different content at different times, whether it's based on geography or based on number of page views that a user has seen during a session, or those that came in from social versus those that came in from search. That can make a big impact. And I know that's stuff that we're working on at Evolve right now.
Shameless plug. All right, so last question here. We've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to put this out to both of you. Can analytics help bring teams together? I know we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, but alignment, right? How do we bring everyone together and drive towards a common goal? Lena, I'll start with you.
Yeah, and I know I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the conversation, but alignment on analytics can be one of those huge team building exercises that you're able to do. As a product manager, my job is really to align what our business goals, design goals, and technical goals are at any given moment. And so being able to go through exercises like that, where you bring folks along for the ride instead of just prescribing things to the team, is so powerful. So I think that if you're deliberate and you have a great framework that you're working with to bring folks in and help brainstorm, what are those big bucket metrics? What are those user actions that lead to those metrics? What's your North Star metric? And then not only end at that point, but then continue to bring folks along with things like real-time dashboards, with things like doing readouts of your let's say NPS score with the different qualitative research that goes into it, continuing to bring folks along for that journey so that you become more of a data-driven organization.
Yeah, and you make a good point. Lynn, about bringing people along. It can help with team alignment throughout the life cycle of the project. Certainly at the start, what are our metrics for success? Let's get information from all key stakeholders, disparate groups, about what is most impactful, what's going to be the success of this project. But then, while you're, let's say it's, after launch or in the middle of the work, what data is coming in? What are our daily numbers? Hey, what are our weekly, what's our weekly status? Where are we in achieving this goal? And because we put those data points together as a team, we can huddle around them and ideate on them as that data comes in every hour, every day, every week. And that aligns us further. And then, of course, at the success of the project, right? When we're recapping, here's where we ended up. Here's where our goal was. Here's what we achieved. And all of that is aligning teams around data and analytics throughout the life cycle of the project.
Great. Well, thank you both. We are at 2 minutes, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you, Lena and Dan, for your time. This was a super insightful panel. Check out ThinkCX episodes 1 through 19 at evolve.ai. If you have any recommended topics or themes that you'd like to discuss, or even if you're interested in joining us as a panelist, would love to have you. Please reach out to hello@evolve.ai. Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you.